I'm Tony Dunkley, a former UK detective and now international advisor on investigating human trafficking. Come with me as I travel across the world to find the front line of modern slavery, learning from international law enforcement and the global anti-trafficking community on their lived experiences in investigating cases, identifying suspects and rescuing survivors. Coming up in this week's episode of Let's Talk Modern Slavery.
Gender-based violence is the only place where you find victims and survivors having to prove themselves.
Yeah.
You know, if I rob you today, Tony, people will have so much sympathy for you. You know, if I shoot you, people will have sympathy for you. It is not the same for survivors.
And I think that's something really important as well, because I don't know if you have the same experience, but when I talk to people who aren't in this space, one of the things that they say is, if they're not locked up, if they're not in chains, if they're not, bound, why don't they just leave?
We want an ideal victim. Why did you scream?
Yeah.
Why? How were you dressed? How were you trafficked?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Yeah.
Are you not smart enough to understand that you are being trafficked?
It's very rare in the human trafficking world that we will see people kidnapped, thrown in the back of a van and bound and taken off. They're deceived, coerced, those kind of things, and they're not chained because there's this psychological game that goes on of carrot and stick, particularly in domestic violence. You'll see people leaving that situation and coming back,
Yes.
and leaving, coming
Yes.
back. And we see the same in the human trafficking world.
Cycle.
Re-trafficked, going back to
Yes.
their captor.
A journey towards healing looks like surviving.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just one step at a time. It could be one step forward and turn back.
And Njeri,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. When we were coming over here, everyone was stopping you to shake your hand and say what amazing work you're doing. I'm aware of what amazing work you're doing, but I want us to tell everyone else as well. So, Njeri, I think we've known each other now, or probably met 3 years ago, 4?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yeah.
It probably was, wasn't it?
I
Yeah, it was a
reckon.
while ago on a training in
Yes.
Kenya. In Kenya.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, it was in Nairobi. Yeah,
Yes.
of course it was. And we cross paths every now and again. Our work is very similar and that kind of thing. But for those that don't know you and don't work in the human trafficking space, the safeguarding space, can you tell us all about yourself?
All right. My name is Njeri Wa Migwi. I run an organization known as Usikimye. Usikimye is Swahili, a word which means do not be silent. Because the work we do carries a lot of taboo around silencing victims and silencing survivors. So I work in gender-based violence, and gender-based violence encompasses a lot of things. It encompasses intimate partner violence, human trafficking, child trafficking. It encompasses child abuse. It encompasses sexual violence, which could mean rape, it could mean child defilement, and things around that. And we do this through doing a lot of multiple programs in the way in which me and Tony have been able to come together a couple of times. Yeah.
How on earth did you get into that journey? I always have to ask people because it's so niche, isn't it? It's a small world that deal with this. But
right.
So what's your story? How did it?
My story is simple, actually. For most people, this is not what really happens. But for me, I think because I was a survivor of intimate partner violence, having been in a marriage that was very abusive. And I stayed in that marriage for a long time. And when I left, I was looking for healing and ways in which I could find myself, because I got married pretty early. And due to that, I really want to tell you that my teenagers and my 20s were all in a marriage, so I didn't even know who I was outside of that marriage. Yeah. And so in my journey for self-discovery, looking for therapy, looking for ways to prop myself and just heal, right? I was like, now that I'm doing this journey, how many other people have been involved in such a thing and would probably also want to heal together with me? And I remember I started a group with my therapist. It was called Survivors Anonymous. And this group, that was in 2017, and in this group, I wrote on Facebook and say, "Hi guys, I'm looking for people who've survived, gender-based violence for us to start a group." And let me tell you, when I tell you 300 women showed up, I almost fainted. I was like, wait, I thought I was the only one. Maybe a couple of...
It's good and it's bad, isn't it? That's happening.
That was the most scary part about it.
Yeah.
And so we met in Alliance and we talked. My therapist was like, you need to take this forward and let's form a more solid group of the people who firmly want to heal. Because 300 is too big a number. We really cannot work with that number. Let us see that we will commit to coming. So we started a small group, and it lasted, we were able to walk a journey with 30 women in 2017 and 15 women in 2018.
Yeah.
And by 2019, myself and my co-founder, who's a friend, Stella Kachina, were like, she's like, I've seen what you're doing, and I think we can do this a little bit better. Let's teach people, so that it's not just a small group that you're working with, but you're now teaching people online and things around that. So that's how I found myself founding what came to become a whole organization.
Yeah. So when you're with these other ladies as well, do you find that your stories are a lot's the same?
Yes.
You're drawing parallels of the same experiences.
Yes.
And
I feel like sometimes in this journey, being able to know what it means for somebody who has gone through such and such a thing, and seeing the parallel of your story in them, can actually be much more empathetic and be much more able to hold their hands. I'm not saying that people working in this space need to have gone through this, but I'm just saying that there is much more empathy.
Yeah.
I understand when somebody goes back to an abusive situation vis-a-vis somebody who's not been there and doesn't understand, oh my God, I keep saving this person. I know so many people who are like, my God, my sister gets beaten all the time, and she kept going back to her husband. What is the problem? Vis-a-vis somebody like me who understands the reasons, who understand the psychology behind going back, who knows that I've been there and kept going back, and I understand that it is a process.
I guess you've had that unique experience and also come out of it the other side.
Yes.
So those ladies who perhaps are still in that psychological stage of not getting through, they can see what it could be.
Yes.
That sort of...
I actually tell them, I tell people, I am I don't just want you to be a survivor, but I want you to thrive after abuse.
Survive and thrive.
Yes, because I think one of the other things is the chokehold of surviving. You're just surviving, just living, not even doing anything. But thriving means that is in the past for you, and you've moved on and be able to build another life for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what my hope is for, the survivors that we work with.
You use the term survivor,
Yes.
and the term survivor comes up a lot within the human trafficking space.
Yes.
It used to be outside of the criminal justice world. It used to be still victim, but now it's survivor. With the work that you're doing, just in relation to the intimate partner violence and domestic violence, you use the term survivor as well.
Yes.
Can you draw parallels between the two of those survivors of human trafficking?
As well as
what's the...
I feel like when you are, victim means the person is still in that situation.
Yeah.
Is still undergoing what they are. Whether it is you are trafficked, somebody who's still in the process of trafficking hasn't really come out of it. Somebody who's still in the process of intimate partner violence is still a victim.
Right.
And even sometimes you'll have to assign victimhood to people who, even though they've left that position, they still don't see themselves past that.
Yeah.
So they are still victims because they've been carried by it. Yes, you've rescued somebody who was, let's say, sold into trafficking, sold into sex trafficking, but they don't see themselves as anything other than that. And I find myself in situations where, especially with victims of trafficking, where they are completely unable to detach themselves from what happened to them. Yeah. Because as most people, that trafficking really is something that is very traumatic, and especially where sexual violence is involved. You find that these victims still cannot believe that they went through this and not able even to come out of that shell and are unable to survive in a world because they're not equipped survive in that world. So that's where the victimhood comes in.
Yeah.
But once somebody is able to move past that, not really you're completely healed, but you're trying to make steps into living into your reality, because your reality is you're no longer there, right? And you have to live.
Yeah.
Because Tony, what else is there?
Yeah.
You're not dead.
Yeah.
So you have to live, and you have to look for ways in which you find healing.
Yeah.
And a journey towards healing looks like surviving.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just one step at a time. Could be one step forward and 10 back.
Yeah.
But it is surviving.
And the 10 back is,
Yes.
and you've touched on it earlier on, of particularly in domestic violence, you'll see people leaving that situation and coming back.
Yes.
And leaving, coming
Yes.
back. And we see the same in the human trafficking
The
world.
cycle.
Re-trafficked, going back to
Yes.
their captor, back to their trafficker, back to their abuser.
I rescued a lady just last year. And now for her, she'd actually been trafficked out of Kenya.
Yeah.
She'd been trafficked all the way to India. And when she got to India, of course, you know what happens. The passport went, and she was told, oh, my friend, there's no jobs here.
Yeah.
You're there. She got into a brothel, and all these things happened. And she was finally, after 3 years, she was finally free and managed to get to the Kenyan consulate and was brought back home. She was brought, she got into my hands.
Yeah.
And this lady told me, I'm sorry, I don't know how else to survive. When I came to Kenya the first time, I was in a brothel. I needed to take me back. I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell her, you know what? You told me you got to school to Form 2. We can get you back to school. I'm trying to, give her building blocks of building
Yeah.
her life back.
Yeah.
And she told me, I'm sorry. I'm trying, but
Yeah.
that life is not for me. I really want to go back to school.
Yeah.
I really want to do all this, but I need to go back to the brothel.
Yeah.
And I just sat there, and I think my heart broke.
Yeah.
And I realized she was still a victim.
Yeah.
And until she was able to unshackle,
Yeah.
and we slept, the following morning she woke up and told me, I need to go back. You need to give me fare. I need to go back to the brothel where I was working.
Yeah. Almost an overwhelming urge to go back. It's like
Yes,
an addiction
yes.
kind of thing. Yeah.
And I was like, and she told me, I cannot survive without what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know what else to do. Here's your fare. Because sometimes you have to let people go.
Yeah.
But for me, I took an additional step. I went with her all the way to the brothel. And I told the brothel mom, if this lady is beaten, because when she was brought to me, she had been really beaten by a customer.
Yeah.
You'll have me to answer to.
I have no doubt that you did that, Njeri. No,
I
you-
absolutely did it because I was so angry because I didn't know how
Yeah.
else to help this lady. But I didn't want my survivor, my victim, to be able to, to go through
Yeah.
the same hands. And I told her, which I did not have. My God, my hope, she never listens to this.
We won't tell her.
Yeah, so I told her, I have videos,
Yeah.
which I don't have, that show your customers. So that's a risk. If you do it, I'm going to leave this.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
sometimes you find yourself in a position where you never thought as a person you never find yourself in.
But you felt you needed to. You felt you needed
Yes,
to step
to
up
protect her.
because she couldn't. She needed someone.
Yeah, and you see when you don't have anybody,
Yeah.
you will be fully taken advantage of.
Yeah.
But with them knowing that she has somewhere she can go to,
Yeah.
her life has changed. I see her occasionally.
Is she out? She's now a survivor, do you think?
No,
She's still in that?
she's still
in
there.
that, yeah.
But I feel like things are getting better.
One,
And
10
because
back.
every time she
One,
comes, I send her to a psychologist, they speak.
Yeah.
So I feel like, we have a chance of actually removing her from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's something really important as well, because I don't know if you have the same experience, but when I talk to people who aren't in this space, one of the things that they say is, if they're not locked up, if they're not in chains, if they're not, bound, why don't they just leave? And the same conversations or narrative happens within the domestic violence world.
Yes.
If it was that bad, if this is true,
Yes.
why didn't you just
Why
go?
did you go back?
And then you touched on the psychologist, the psychological,
Yes,
I
the
can't speak, the
psychology
psychology
of
side of
coming
thing,
back.
of actually, it's very rare in the human trafficking world that we will see people kidnapped, thrown in the back of a van and bound and taken off. They're deceived, coerced, those kind of things, and they're not chained because there's this psychological game that goes on of carrot and stick, nice guy, bad guy,
Yes.
what,
People
bad
don't-
woman,
I think
nice woman,
the
and
thing
it
that
just
most
does
people don't
this.
understand is coercive control.
Yeah,
And also how the brain perceives all of this. And I think people really underscore how the brain works.
Yeah.
Whereby even in the cycle of abuse, whether it is trafficking or it is in any form of violence, especially gender-based violence, we are looking at where it's a triangle actually. Honeymoon stage, where it is a seduction stage
Yeah.
where I am presenting myself,
Yeah.
even as the trafficker or as the abuser. I'm presenting myself as this good guy,
Yeah.
right? And I'm going to take you, and you're going to get a good job, and all these good things are going to
It's
happen.
grooming, isn't it? Like a grooming a child, it's
actually
grooming an adult.
right?
Yeah.
You're grooming an adult, and it's a feel-good stage, right? And then we go to the tension making, where now you find yourself in that situation of abuse.
Yeah.
Abuse hasn't really happened yet,
Yeah.
but there are signs of abuse. It
Gradual,
could be
small by small,
gradual. Yes,
yeah.
it's already starting
Yeah.
to look like this. So you're in this tension stage where I'm abusing you, maybe by insulting you, gaslighting you, degrading you, belittling you, all these things, calling you names.
Yeah.
And I start making you feel like you are not capable. And our brain, when we get into that place, our brain starts accepting this is our reality, because that's how we perceive the world.
And they feel so low because of how
Yes.
they've been treated. They
Yes.
feel that any sense of love shown to them is...
Exactly.
Yeah, this
And then
poor-
you're being breadcrumbed, you're being fed small attention and small love.
If that person had come up to that lady in the first place and been horrible or
Yes.
called them names
You
and shown who they
wouldn't
were,
be there.
you wouldn't be there.
You wouldn't be there. And people
That's
need
right.
to realize that in all this situation, little bits of love that you're thrown for, like the way you want to catch chicken. Now what do? You give it little bits of chicken feed or maize or whatever, and the chicken comes.
Yeah.
Then you grab it.
Yeah.
The chicken did not know that all this was leading to its slaughter.
That makes
And then now
sense.
you go to the active stage where now it's actual abuse is happening. Remember, this person groomed you. So even when the abuse happens, you think it is your lot.
Yeah.
You deserve it. This is what you deserve. All right? And then the cycle starts again. I'm really sorry this happened to you.
Yeah.
I'm really going to change. I'm going to be nicer. I'm going to talk to the person who's been mistreating you and get you into a better position. That's why you find reactive abuse happens, where even I was abused, and now I find somebody who has lesser power than me,
Yeah.
and I'm coerced.
And that's that cycle. Is that part of the cycle of abuse?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Yes. That's why you find sometimes women are beaten by their husband, and they in turn beat the children. The way you find in a situation of human trafficking, the trafficker recruits a trafficked person,
Yeah.
right? Recruits them to actually mistreat the other survivors.
Yeah.
The other victims.
Yeah.
And they can re-traumatize them.
Yeah.
Because always remember, power over. When my power is taken and I'm helpless,
Yeah.
what do you think I'm going to react to? The person who I certainly feel have less power. So, in fact, in the trafficking world, I felt like that is such it's so strange, because people be like, but you are trafficked. Why would you do this
Yeah.
to somebody else?
Hi, this is Tony from Illustro and host of the Let's Talk Modern Slavery podcast. Illustro Consultancy provides international training, investigation, research support, and educational services to criminal justice practitioners, private industries, students, and the wider public in general on preventing, identifying, and dealing with modern slavery and wider human rights violations. I just want to take a moment to tell you about our new training workshops for businesses. The European Union have now introduced the EU Directive on Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence. The CSDD requires companies to identify and prevent, end, or mitigate the actual and potential impact of their activities on the environment and on human rights abuses. At Illustro, we understand that in order to find the problem, you need to know what you're looking for in the first place. Our workshops are delivered by internationally experienced experts and designed for business personnel to understand what modern slavery is, how to identify it, how to investigate it, and how to practically reduce its presence within your business, supply chains, and customer base. So, if you'd like to learn more about our in-person or remotely delivered workshops, then visit us at www.illustroconsultancy.co.uk and download our brochure. At Illustro Consultancy, we know the business of modern slavery, but more than that, we understand how to deliver training to businesses that can prevent it. Stay safe. And on the criminal justice side of things, when we do these sort of operations with larger groups who've been trafficked for prolonged periods of time, we'll normally see one that has a hierarchical position over the others. And it's generally the one that's been trafficked for a long time. Yeah. And that indoctrination, that grooming's taken place, that coercive sort of relationship where that individual in that new position is given a position of trust, like you say,
Yes.
to oversee the other people.
Yes.
So in, let's say, within a brothel, for example, just to help visualize, we'd have one who's been there for a long time,
Yes.
then suddenly, might orchestrate holding the money, take the money from the clients,
Yes.
and that position of trust slightly.
Yes.
And then when we have large groups of males that have been trafficked, normally for forced labour, we'll also see the same thing happen.
Same thing.
We call it an alpha victim in the criminal justice world.
Uh-huh.
So we have someone who, if we've got someone in the labour side of things, it's normally actually someone who is physically bigger as well,
and fit.
and those kind of things, in order to suppress the rest of the group, through physical beatings or whatever it might be. So that's something that we see a lot, and it's really, really strange. And and you obviously see that with.
And actually, that's actually a victim as well.
Of course.
And most of the time, we don't think like that.
Yeah.
We think you've been doing this to these people, so you're part of the traffickers. But the truth is, this person is as helpless as the other person.
Yeah.
But they feel sort of a little bit more loved.
Yeah.
A little bit more affection, and so in this instance, then they are able to be grateful, and in return, because I'm grateful for what my trafficker or my abuser does, I'm going to be able to abuse these people.
And do you know what? In the criminal justice side, this is so important and is really understated. We're starting to use the term status shift. So let's example from what you're saying, because you've used victim and survivor, that is a particular time. It's a time frame. So in this point in time, that person's a victim. In this point in time, they're out and they're a survivor. But we can probably come back before that or after it. So if we go and do a raid on a premise on day one, well, actually, we'll go across a certain amount of people, one of which might be an alpha victim and looks like is a trafficker. So we'll arrest that person and we'll treat the rest as more survivor victim. But the reality is, had we gone in 1 year earlier,
he'd have been part of that group.
well, that trafficker would have been part of the group and treated as a victim. So how do you work at that? It's quite difficult for law enforcement particularly to have that open mind, to see everything as it is, the bigger picture.
And that is why it is important to understand psychology of victimhood. I think it's very important when you're coming into the world of gender-based violence to understand how victimhood looks like. That there are different ways in which victimhood presents itself. There is no ideal victim. And that is a problem. We want an ideal victim. Why did you scream? Why? How were you dressed? How were you trafficked? What were you doing? Are you not smart enough to understand that you are being trafficked?
Condescending kind of questioning. And
I feel like one of the things we really do not look at is how we treat survivors of gender-based violence, because we always feel like, in actual fact, gender-based violence is the only place where you find victims and survivors having to prove themselves. If I rob you today, Tony, people will have so much sympathy for you. If I shoot you, people have sympathy for you. It is not the same for survivors.
Use the term gender-based violence, and that's a world that I work in as well. But explain that to someone who, might have their perception of what it is, or what is it?
So gender-based violence is actually violence that is perpetuated due to unequal power. It's that simple, really. If you think about it, when a husband beats the wife, who has the power? It's always power over. When a rapist rapes, it's never, and I need people to understand that rape is not a crime of passion. Right? It's a crime of one, power. They feel good because they have power over you, and two, it's a crime of opportunity. So those are the two things you need to understand about rape. Trafficking as well is part of gender-based violence, and I don't know why it's removed. Of course it's removed because it has its own category, but it does fall under, because you will find that within child abuse, a child was trafficked from a certain place to a certain place, either for sexual abuse or for labor purposes. And whenever sexual abuse appears, that's gender-based violence. So they're very much intertwined. And you will find that most victims of human trafficking do undergo some sort of a level of sexual violence. And for me, that squarely falls back again on And even when victims, sometimes you get the victims who have substance abuse disorder because they've been given that to be able to perform such things.
Yeah.
And even such acts as, being in a brothel and having to service. I remember there's a victim who was telling me that she slept with so many men. She doesn't know how not to sleep with men. That's all she knows, because there were so many men that she had to service. And you have to realize that she had to take drugs in order to be able to live this life. So all of this, because that's also coercion.
Yeah.
I'm coercing you to take drugs so you can be able to do this work.
Yeah.
And you'll find when these people come out, most people do not have sympathy for them because they actually have an idea that maybe they enjoyed it.
It's really sad, isn't it?
It is.
Very
it's
much
a dark world.
There's many factors, vulnerability factors that I'm aware of or have seen that really lay the foundation or create an environment where people are more likely to become victims of trafficking.
Of course.
Poverty, etc., but also gender, inequality or lack of equity, or not just with gender, but also through communities that lack the power, minority groups or otherwise. In the context of Kenya, I'm well aware of events that have happened quite recently. What's going on here in Kenya that's, and if we don't want to specifically say about Kenya, the world, that's okay, but what's going on where women are being killed because of, I just can't get my head around it. What's going on?
I am, wrapping your head around the fact that in January alone, 32 women were killed in Kenya. And I can't even say, I want to say this. Yes, the factors that have led to this, but there is also the idea of unfettered and unchecked and runaway gender-based violence. Yeah. Because if we checked it and if there was justice that was properly followed and people actually get to see, you see when there is apathy, and I know I can get away with it, of the 32 women killed, only 5 have had people arrested. So we have to also start looking at things like, how then do we convince people? I think justice exists there so that people can actually behave like people.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like that's where we need to call the government into account. Because how are people killing people in a manner likely? There are things which, even as a government, when it comes to justice, the way, for example, and I will use her case because this is so close to my heart because it really bothers me. Rita Waini was killed so brutally and so cruelly that the government pathologist, the head of pathology in Kenya, seen so many accident bodies, seen so many things, said he had never seen anything like that because our girl was skinned alive. Now, do you know that the people accused in that case are out on bail? Yeah. Now, there are cases in which the government should be like, no, this one, no. In as much as we give bail for all things, I don't think. So what do you think the general population sees the minute when people like that are out on bail? We believe that justice is not being served. Yeah. When a case like, for example, the current case you saw for Joey took 6 years for Monica to actually get justice. Yeah. Right? And so you have to keep on asking yourself, you have to keep on looking at this and ask yourself, how does justice look like and how does justice actually apply? Yeah. Because we need the government to step up. First of all, in Kenya, the government hasn't acknowledged we have a femicide problem. Right? And femicide, of course, naturally is the killing of women due to their gender. Yeah. And you find like 80% of this is done by people they love. Yeah. And I remember where I work, there was a lady who was killed in January. And do you know the men around that area raised money for that man to run? And I think I can't start explaining why this is so bad. But I feel like the case keeps on continuing because nobody's taking this seriously. So
how's it got to the stage where that is even happening? I appreciate that the criminal justice side of things is not doing what it needs to do, but how's it got to the point where this is happening at the scale that it is?
I always feel like this. Unequal power is a terrible thing. Patriarchal society is a terrible thing because it means as long as men are perceiving like their power is being taken away. Suppose somebody did not cook food and they were killed. As long as there is a certain, subjugation of women happens, and then you find that because of that, there's a tendency of the little power I feel like is being taken away, and especially in the current economic crisis that Kenya is going through. Anything that I'm doing is probably as a woman, and you feel like it's threatening your masculinity. And we have also had the infiltration of the red pill here. Yes, toxic masculinity is thriving. It's well and thriving in this country. We have teachers that keep on teaching this, keep on saying women need to be subjugated, women do not have a head over their shoulders. And so you can imagine all of these are factors. Yeah. All of these are factors that have led to women actually losing their lives.
And do you think the longer this goes on, the more it will perpetuate in terms of, if males in the household with their wives?
Let me tell you why I'm
children,
going to blame the government. There's a man who went on Twitter and wrote exactly what was going on, and he said he's going to kill his wife. And tagged on his tweets, he actually tagged the DCI and so on and so forth, police and the media and everybody, and nobody bothered. And 4 days later, he killed his wife. He actually I read that because people tagged me in that tweet, and I couldn't believe it, and I'm like, please don't kill your wife. I mean, just let her go. And people are telling me, no, he killed her. He killed her. Yeah. That was last week. I'm not talking about a long time ago. 2 weeks ago, in a place called Transoya, a man beat his wife with stones in front of a shopping center to death, and not anybody moved a finger to help her. They recorded it though, but they did not do anything about it. So I also need to understand where the apathy is coming from. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
When I say people have apathy about all of this, like, oh, it's their business. And she died. And so I am sitting here and I'm wondering, Kenyans are generally kind, considerate people. Yeah. Very warm people. What's happening to us? Yeah. Where did we lose it?
So there need to be some big shift across society.
Yes. We need to shift the narrative. And the only way we can shift this narrative is change gender-based violence and how it's seen, how it's approached, and how we fight it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those that are lucky enough to escape, and your organisation is someone that steps in there, aren't they? And you go and rescue these people, these children, these women, and house them, look after them. So what's the process? How does it work?
We have a helpline. We also have social media. We're very loud there. And people actually tell us, listen, in this village, this and this is happening. And I suspect, according to what you've been telling us, this could be happening to this child. And I am unable to do it because I will still live in this village after everything happens. Yeah. So I am just reporting anonymously. Can you help? And so we tell them, can you tell us where it's happening? And so we're able to go pick the police, because we can't go by ourselves. That's how we'll get killed. And so we're able to pick the child, take them to hospital, and start the justice process. Yeah. So immediately we take the child or the person, and then we go and report to the police, and take to hospital, build evidence-based. Of course, it has to be evidence-based.
Of course, yeah.
Build the evidence, and then start the court process. Wow. So my life actually revolves around hospitals, courts, and of course the places where I go to rescue people. Other than that, obviously I'm also doing a lot of fundraising because it's very cash intensive work. Yeah. Is
are they safe? Would you call them safe houses? Are these places that are publicly known, or they're
no. You can't. Can you imagine? And I tell people anytime they want to visit, what if you came there and found your sister-in-law? What happened? Wouldn't you go and tell your brother who's looking for his wife? So no, they're not publicly known. We run 3 safe houses, and we make sure nobody knows. Yeah. Even how we bring the victim there and how we remove the victim never even knows where they are, because they're not even in Nairobi. Yeah, because you also want a tranquil, safe place where somebody's going to feel safe and, a healing atmosphere. Yeah, so we run that as well.
So like you said, I mean, these things they're not free. It needs funding and those kind of things. So I know you're doing a lot of public awareness raising about, the issues that are going on, but as well as your organisation. So what's next for you? How do you want this to grow? Or are you happy with?
I think one of the proudest things I've done this year is to be a co-organizer of the Femicide march that happened with over 10,000 people showed up.
Yeah.
And
which was big on social media. I mean, it was going all over the world. I was
yes,
watching it
yeah,
a lot. And,
right.
yeah.
And I feel like the conversation that I want is how do we change the narrative? How do we shift the narrative? How do you get more people to report? How do you get more people to actually push? Because pushing for reforms, we have some of the best, don't you have to admit, Kenya has some of the best legal framework. Policies. The problem comes between how does a policy get implemented? So mine is to keep on pushing, because I will not stop pushing, because I want a just and free Kenya. And I want a Kenya where women are free to live their lives, where girls can grow up to be who they desire to be. So for me, I will keep on fighting for equity. That is my fight, is to keep on fighting for equity, because I do believe at the end of it, we can actually reduce almost zero rates.
Njeri, if anyone can do it, I'm sure it's you. And you've been I mean, literally, I've been seeing you on so many social media platforms, and obviously with the march that happened as well. You're really sort of trailblazing in Kenya, you know, leading the way in this kind of work and trying to change things, but change things from really the root causes, which is an amazing thing. So from my side, thank you for everything you're doing. It's been a pleasure meeting you when I did, during the trainings, and when our paths cross as well. And I hope that we'll cross a lot more in the future. So thank you very much, and stay safe.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Njeri is a force to be reckoned with. Her own personal experiences of intimate partner violence and coming through that process of recovery have empowered her to make a change, not only for herself, but for her community and entire country. When Njeri explains about the differences between victim and survivor, that resonates. We see victims are still in a position of exploitation, still being trafficked, still under conditions of gender-based violence. Even when they leave, they're still victims. They can't detach. Survivors are those that have mentally moved on. They've broken the mental chains, started the process of recovery. Some go back, and often more than once. But like Njeri said, there's no ideal victim. Njeri is now bringing people together and taking a stand against abuse, against trafficking, against rape, against femicide and gender-based violence. I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more about this incredible person. If you'd like to learn more about Njeri and Usikimye, visit their website at www.usikimye.org. Coming up in the next episode of Let's Talk Modern Slavery.
Some societies believe in sending their children, to be smuggled away so that they could go outside, work, and bring their money.
So it's normal, it's expected that their son or daughter, I don't know, but son, normally we hear about men, but I'm sure women as well, are expected to go on a journey outside of their country to a place where they can earn money and remit back to the family.
Exactly. They'll be put in container, and most of them die there, and inside the container. Like many people, 60 people in one container crossing the ocean, which is very dangerous. We hear a lot about this, how people have died, like 70 people died, 60 people died. They almost never survive that.
Along those routes, migrants are kidnapped and basically ransomed back. You know, a video is taken of them being assaulted or otherwise sent back to family, and they pay these ransoms often.
It's business. Sending people, smuggling people, trafficking people, it brings them money for most of them.